Thank you. I'm Congressman Mo Brooks from the Tennessee Valley. Appreciate y'all hanging around. For what it's worth, the radar looks pretty good. It's just cloud cover. There's not supposed to be much in the way of rain. As you may know, I'm a candidate for the United States Senate. There are about 10 candidates on the Republican side now and 8 on the Democrat side. It's quite remarkable that for this election we had the incumbent plus 17 others who believe that they're in a position to be able to win this thing. We'll see how that plays out. I think ultimately it's going to come down on the Republican side to 3 of us. According to the polling data, it's pretty much myself and one more, and then Luther Strange. Now the other 7, if they have financing, any of them can jump up to the top tier, just depending on whether they can raise the kind of money that is necessary to be successful. What I would like to do here is introduce myself a little bit for those folks that are not familiar with me. Most of the folks up here in the northern tier of the state know me fairly well, either directly from having seen me on TV or my visits in this part of the state, or by reputation. That having been said, let me give a little bit of background. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, and I don't want this to come across as being boastful, but I do want to be factual, so that you'll have an idea of who you're considering for this United States Senate seat. I have probably won more elections as a Republican than any other elected Republican in the state of Alabama right now. I've had 12 successful general elections as a Republican carrying the Republican banner, and I've also prevailed in about 5 Republican primaries. The first election that I had was way back in 1982 when I had kind of brownish red hair. That's changed a little bit over the years. Nonetheless, that was for the legislature. Now, when I ran for the legislature, I was pretty young. I was in my 20s. And I was probably too young to know that Republicans couldn't win. And so I signed up as a Republican. And, I saw Jimmy Carter and I saw Ronald Reagan. For me, it was an easy decision. What I didn't realize at the time was that in the legislature, there were 136 Democrats and only 4 Republicans. So we were pretty badly outnumbered. And despite all those folks saying, you're a Republican, no Republican wins in the Tennessee Valley. And there were no elected Republicans in the Tennessee Valley back then. Nonetheless, I had a belief system. I looked at what the Republican Party stood for and what the Democratic Party stood for, and I decided I'm a Republican. That's the way I'm running. Was successful that year, first Republican ever elected in House District 18 at that point in time. Now, moving forward, I was re-elected 3 more times as a state legislator. Then moved on to Madison County District Attorney. As an aside, I used to be also an Assistant District Attorney in Tuscaloosa County. I was appointed by Governor Guy Hunt. Looked pretty good. Guy Hunt at the time was popular. George Bush was popular. By 1992, you know what happened. It wasn't a very good year for Republicans in 1992. And George Bush and I were the last ones off that sinking ship, the SSGOP in Madison County. Both of us came close to 50%, but neither of us was able to carry that 50% mark in order to get elected. After that, I ran against an 8-year Republican incumbent for the Madison County Commission. Again, folks said you can't win that thing. And that's not the way my parents raised me. They said if you're going to try to do something, well then you do it. And you let the consequences be what they may be, the results be what they may be. In that Republican primary, we were able to prevail with 63% of the vote against an incumbent county commissioner. Elected 3 more times to the county commission. Then in 2010, I was very upset with what I was seeing happening at the national level, whether it be health care or deficit and debt. If you look at this debt chart, you can see what was going on with these $1 trillion deficits. We had a string of 4 of them in a row. And having an economics background, that was my education and training, I thought about it and said, we can't go into an insolvency and bankruptcy of our country. It took over 200 years for our ancestors to build this country up, and an insolvency and bankruptcy in the United States of America would be debilitating, it would be horribly destructive. And so with that as a motivation, I decided to run for the United States Congress to try to save our country from that kind of horrific economic downfall. And people said, but Mo, you can't win. No Republican has won this congressional seat in 136 years. Well, that might have been the case. I qualified or announced my candidacy for the United States Congress About 6 months later, based on the polling data, the incumbent Democrat decided that he had a better chance switching parties, and he did so, and ran as a Republican. As often happens in Washington, they protect incumbents. So the Republican hierarchy in Washington that kind of encouraged me to run, all of a sudden they were supporting this party switcher. And so we went up against
Mallory's coming to get me, and y'all are going to ride home with her. And she's going to take you home, okay?
Good guy running by the name of Les. The two of them raised $2.5 million. I raised $160-something thousand, and we were able to win that Republican primary without a runoff. And so after that, elected 3 more times to the United States Congress. I mention that again so that you'll know a couple things about me. I'm willing to take risk if I believe it's necessary for my community or my country. If that's what we have to do, then we've got to do it. And I think we're in a similar situation in that regard right now. More importantly, however, what I want you to focus on with respect to those elections is that I've had 9 re-elections. And the re-elections I would submit are very, very important, because that's when the people who have hired you for a job, that's your performance evaluation. And it's either you are rehired or you're fired. And in those 9 re-elections as a legislator, as a county commissioner, and also as a United States Congressman, in Republican primaries and general elections, none of my challengers have ever got any closer than 30 percentage points of me on election day. And I mention that to emphasize that if you'll give me the opportunity to serve you in the United States Senate, y'all have never really had the chance to put me into an office of this nature before. Then I commit to you that I'll do the same thing that I've done for the people who have elected me in the past to serve. And I hope that I will be able to do such a good job for you that you will elect me in 2020 as I have been re-elected on those other 9 occasions. So that's kind of the background, okay, of who I am with my history as a Republican candidate in various positions at the state level, at the federal level, and also at the county commission level. Now, there are tons of issues, and I'm going to open up for any kinds of questions y'all may have about anything. It can be about my personal background. It can be about public policy issues. One thing that I think most folks recognize, and it's probably because my dad was an engineer, my 2 sons are engineers, and I'm supposed to be an engineer. But I went wayward, okay? But I still kind of think analytically like an engineer does. So if y'all want to ask me questions, please understand that I'm not very diplomatic. I'll share with you what I believe, and if you agree with me, great. If you disagree with me, that's fine too. This is America. We have a lot of disagreements on the direction that our country ought to take. But in terms of all the issues that are out there, I'm going to focus just on one. And that one is our deficit and debt. The Republicans, we got into control, and we slowly but surely whittled this thing down to $439 billion. Now that's still a horrific number. If you go back to 2006, when the Democrats were successfully able to capture the House and the Senate, they were bashing George Bush because he had $200 billion deficits, $300 billion deficits, $400 billion deficits. Now look at us. We've had these 4 streams of $1 trillion deficits, 600, 483, 439. Now we're going up to 587. I wish we could go back to the days of the George Bush deficits, because America would be a whole lot more financially solvent than we are now. These are the projections of deficits going forward. The big one is in 2023. The Congressional Budget Office is warning us that if we don't change our financial trajectory, then we're going to start $1 trillion deficits right here indefinitely until we collapse economically as a country. And I'm talking about something that is far worse than what we saw in the Great Depression. And that's why I'm so anxious about this situation, and I'm going to spend time with you just talking about it. And at least during the Great Depression, our central government was solvent. When a central government goes belly up, the central government is no longer solvent. So you have no safety net to help people with. Now let me move on to another chart. This is debt service. When you go into debt, you have to pay money to service that debt. Right now, according to the CBO, our debt service is in the neighborhood of $250 billion right down here. Also, according to the CBO, they're projecting that within a decade, it's going to go up to $750 billion a year, more or less. So that means you're looking at about a $500 billion a year increase in debt service. Now, that money has to come from someplace. In the United States Constitution, we have a constitutional obligation to pay our debt and debt service. So that makes it kind of the first priority. And I want y'all to think about where we spend our money right now and ask yourselves, where are we going to come up with that $500+ billion a year to satisfy our constitutional obligations to pay our debt service costs? To put it into perspective, that's about 10 transportation programs of the federal government gone because of our having financially irresponsible people in Washington, D.C. who, for whatever reason, cannot constrain themselves to the revenue that we have. That's almost as much as we spend on national defense. That's more than we spend on Medicaid. Okay? This is troubling to me. But it's a reality, and these are the warnings that we're getting. Finally, this is where the CBO is telling us if we don't change our financial path, what it's going to look like in total debt. Right now we're about $20 trillion. They're warning us that we're going to be in the neighborhood of $30 trillion within 10 years. That is in part why the debt service costs go up so much. It's not just that interest rates are expected to rise, it's also that principal now is expected to be $10 trillion more than it is right now. Let me share with you a little bit of detail for those of you who do not have economics background or don't keep track of these things like I do and other economists do. Some of the consequences of a country that goes to insolvency and bankruptcy. And I'm going to pick on two countries so that we can learn from them. You know, it's a whole lot better to learn from other people's mistakes than it is for you to commit the mistakes yourself. One of those countries is a country by the name of Greece. Now, in fairness, they're not in that bad a shape. Yeah, they can't pay their bills, but at least they have someone who bails them out. The European community in the last 6 or 7 years has bailed out Greece 3 different times. Now, who's going to bail out the United States of America? I don't know of anybody that would bail us out. But even with Greece having been bailed out 3 different times in the last 6 or 7 years by the European community because they can't pay their debt obligations, their unemployment rate for 18 to 24-year-olds is in the neighborhood of upper 40 percentile, almost 50%. Now think about the impression that that has on young adults in Greece as they're trying to figure out how in the world they're going to be able to start a family to get a job when their unemployment rate is almost 50%. With respect to the population as a whole in Greece, their unemployment rate is in the mid-20s. It goes up a little bit, goes down a little bit, but basically centered around mid-20s. That's pretty close to what the United States of America suffered during the Great Depression. So even though they have been bailed out 3 times, that's the economic consequences, the depression that is associated with years and years and years of government leaders that, who in order to get elected, promise to spend money they don't have, keep pushing the bill down the road, stealing from our kids and grandkids, with the result being what we're seeing in Greece right now. Now, let me look at a worse example, Venezuela. You know, the Democratic Party about 1960s really has morphed into the Socialist Party over the last half century. By Socialist Party, I mean that they have, in effect, adopted the socialist economic model. And the socialism, to be clear, it's not communism. Socialism is where the government takes over more and more of the economy. It's like government-run health care, where they want to take us, okay? It's taking from one group of people who work for a living to give it that money to people who don't work for a living. Those kind of wealth transfers. That's socialism. It's Dodd-Frank, where they've intervened in the banking system to a larger and larger degree, dictating what people with capital can and cannot do. All of this is socialist to the extent that the government is taking over more and more sectors of the economy, dictating how the economy is to operate. On the consumer side, well, again, that's government-run health care, where the government starts dictating to you what you can and cannot buy, whether it be health care or light bulbs. That's socialism. Free enterprise, on the other hand, is about freedom and individual liberty, where everybody gets to decide for themselves what they're going to do with their time and their effort. Venezuela succumbed to the siren song of socialism. They are now in the throes of a horrific insolvency and bankruptcy. And let me share with you some data, just so that you'll understand how bad it is. In Venezuela, over the last 12 months, 75% of their population has had an average weight loss of 19 pounds because they can't get the calories, the food to sustain their body weight. That's bad. One of the ways in which you try to get out of an insolvency and bankruptcy is you start deflating the value of your currency, where each pound or peso or dollar is worth less and less. In Venezuela, that's in effect what they're doing, where they're just printing more money. That's what the Democrats will tell you. Oh, we don't have to worry about that debt. We just print more money, and that's how we pay it off. Well, the problem with that is inflation. In Venezuela right now, depending on who you look at, what your data source is, the inflation rate for this year is expected to be in the neighborhood of 1,600 to 2,200%. Now, what does a 2,200% inflation rate mean? That means that a gallon of milk last year that cost $2.
I guess it is.
This year costs $44. That gallon of milk that this year costs $44, next year costs over $900. That's what happens when you have people who believe that you can just print more money and pay off your debt, that currency is worth a whole lot less. I don't know how many people out here operate a business, or have operated a business, but it is impossible to plan under those circumstances. So in Venezuela, you've had now over 50 straight days of rioting and protests. You've had over 40 people killed. Venezuela right now has a homicide rate that is one of the 2 worst on the planet outside of war zones. As people are struggling to find a way to get food in the mouths of their kids. Their infant mortality rate has gone way up. Their death of the mom at birth rate has gone way up. Their ability to get drugs to help stop diseases has gone way down. They're in the neighborhood of 50 to 75% fewer drugs available to help treat illnesses than before all this collapse occurred. You've got diseases that used to be eradicated in Venezuela that have come back, malaria being one of them. So you've got the death associated with that. Folks, that's what happens when you have a central government collapse. And so I want to commit to you that I'll do everything I can to stop the United States of America from going into an insolvency and bankruptcy. On the House floor, I vote against a lot of these spending bills out of recognition that we don't have the money to pay for it. And we've got to be much more prudent with our spending habits. By way of example, we had a spending bill just a couple of weeks ago. Now, certain segments of those industries that rely on the federal government for their money, they're all happy. But I voted against it because it's going to increase our deficit next year roughly $40 billion that we don't have to borrow to get and can't afford to pay back. That's not right for us to steal from our kids and grandchildren, to steal from America's future. And I voted against so many spending bills on the House floor that some of my more liberal Republican colleagues have given me a new nickname. Instead of it being Mo, short for Morris, it's now No Brooks. That's exactly what I'll do in the United States Senate if that's what I have to do to try to get our folks to be financially responsible, to minimize our risk of suffering an insolvency and bankruptcy of a country that took over 200 years of our ancestors to build. Now, there are a lot of other issues out there. Let me close on, with these 2 points. To the extent ethics is an issue, and I suspect that ethics is a big issue in this Senate race based on some of the things that have transpired over the last 6 to 12 months. I have what many would refer to as an impeccable ethics record. And again, don't take my word for it. Look at my record. I have served as a Tuscaloosa Assistant District Attorney and a Madison County District Attorney, as a state legislator, as a county commissioner, and as a congressman. In effect, all this public service is in excess of 30 years total. Not one time, if I had anybody file a complaint against me, valid or invalid and politically motivated, with either the Alabama Ethics Commission or with any governing body at the federal level of ethics issues. Not once.
Like what you want.
I believe that if you're going to be in public service, that you have to put your city, your county, your state, and your country above your own self-interest. And if you're not willing to do that, then you shouldn't be running. So look at my record. when you're wondering who's going to carry Alabama ethics to Washington, D.C. The second one is this. I would submit to you that I have the only record of proven conservative leadership out of all the people who are running. Now, I understand that's a rather bold statement, but you can look at my record as a state legislator where I was ranked #1 in the fight against higher tax increases by the Alabama Taxpayers Defense Fund out of 140 House members and senators. So if you believe that that's the way to go, just look at my record. I've cast thousands of votes, maybe 5,000 to 10,000 votes. So I've got that backdrop that you can look at as a Madison County Commissioner, never voted to increase taxes. As a United States Congressman, if you are familiar with an entity called the Heritage Foundation, they have a lobby, well, a more politically active wing called Heritage Action, and they evaluate our records on various issues of a conservative nature. And with Heritage Action over this last session of Congress, I was in the top 10 out of 435 congressmen. If you like Club for Growth, or the National Taxpayers Union, or the American Conservative Union, over my 6 years serving the United States Congress, I've been in the top 20% according to their record evaluations of all 435 congressmen. United States Business and Industry Council, 200 businesses representing over 200,000 jobs in America. They named me, the 5th District Congressman, #1 on job creation issues out of 93 freshmen, my freshman term, 112th Congress, #1 out of 93. If border security and illegal immigration is an issue to you, and I would pray that it is, based on all the things that have gone wrong because of border insecurity, there's an entity called Numbers USA. Numbers USA is the only entity I know of that evaluates our border security record. And for 6 straight years, I've had a perfect A+ 100% record with Numbers USA, the best out of 435 congressmen. So when I say that I have a record of proven conservative leadership, you can verify all this stuff by looking at my votes or by going to these different groups that evaluate us congressmen based on the issues that are important to them, and you can verify that that's where I have been and that's where I will be if you put me in the United States Senate. Let me close with this one comment about the United States Senate, and then I'll open up for any questions that you may have. The House, in the last session of Congress, we passed over 500 bills that never received a vote on the floor of the United States Senate. Now I want you to, it was a little bit different last year. We had Barack Obama. Right now, we have President Donald Trump. That means we have the White House. We have 230 some odd congressmen, close to 240. That means we have the House. We have 52 senators. Democrats have 48. We have control of the United States Senate. There is no reason on God's green earth that we're going to allow 48 Democrat senators, a minority, to block the will of a majority of the United States Senate elected by Americans, a majority of the House of Representatives elected by Americans, and the President of the United States elected by Americans. Yet that is what is going on in the United States Senate right now. All because of an arcane filibuster rule that was passed in the early 1800s, and it took them a quarter of a century to figure out that it created the filibuster. Okay, it was an accident of history. If you give me the opportunity to represent you in the United States Senate, now keep in mind, I'd be 1 vote out of 100. I can't guarantee results, but I can guarantee how I'm going to conduct myself. And I promise you that I will do everything I can to make sure that majority rule in the United States Senate prevails on things that we have to pass. Things that we have to pass at a minimum are funding bills to fund the federal government so that we do not have a risk of a federal government shutdown. You just saw a rules change in the United States Senate on Supreme Court justices. You've got to fill a Supreme Court justice. Now, to take it a step further, I would prefer that we abolish the filibuster rule across the board. Now, I understand the risk associated with that when we're in the minority, but if you look at it historically, know this. Democrats from time to time throughout the last century have had occasions when they have the White House, the House, and a filibuster-proof Senate. Republicans have never had that. So what happens? When the Democrats have that circumstance, they are able to get their socialist policies adopted that undermine the foundational principles that have made America a great nation, and we are never in a position to reverse them. Because we never get up to that magic number of 60 Republicans to be able to overcome the threat of a Democrat filibuster. So if you want to know why we don't have funding for the border wall, it's because of this archaic rule where a majority of the United States Senate is letting a minority dictate to us what we can and cannot do. If you want to know why President Trump can't get his agenda through the United States Congress, it's because a minority of the United States Senate has the power that the majority has given them to stop us from making progress that is needed to change the things that are undermining our country's future. So I'm a candidate for the United States Senate. The election is August the 15th, a very short period away. I've got some very good polling results. We've been narrowing the gap quite a bit from what we did in April to what we did in mid-May. And I'm very encouraged in the direction we're going. There are 10 candidates. I'm in third. Roy Moore and Luther Strange are in 1 and 2. But the gap is closed very well. So I'm moving in the right direction, but I need y'all's help. If you do want to help, please go to MoBrooksForSenate.com, MoBrooksForSenate.com.
Hey, guess what?
It's going to be a blitzkrieg election. We don't even have yard signs yet. It's only 12 days ago that I announced for the United States Senate. It takes a while to get those things printed, but we hope to have them, yard sign, bumper stickers, brochures, in the next 7 to 10 days where we can become more visible. But this is your state, it's your country, and you're going to have to decide, quite frankly, in this election, whether you want the Washington, D.C. swamp to dictate to you who our next senator is going to be, or the millions upon millions of dollars they're going to use to try to persuade you that all the other candidates are really bad and there's only one candidate that's really good. Quite frankly, I don't know about y'all, but I don't think Kentucky really needs a third senator. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell who's trying to buy this thing, where our senator will be heavily indebted to Kentucky, and less so to the state of Alabama. So at this point, I'll open up for any questions you may have on any public policy issue, anything about my background. No restraints. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask or any suggestions they'd like to make? Y'all have already been through 2 speeches, so I guess you're worn out. Seeing none, I'll be milling around for a little bit. Thank you so much for hanging around here long enough for me to be able to present my candidacy to you good folks over here in DeKalb County.
We just want to thank the Congressman for taking the time to come out today. I know he's got a packed schedule, and we appreciate you stopping by and spending some time with us. And we just want to thank all of you guys again for taking the time to come join us and eat some crawfish with us. Maybe you'll be able to get the smell off your hands sometime in the next month. So that's going to wrap us up for the evening. So I think we're going to start cleaning things up. So just thank everybody again and vote Republican.